You look in the mirror one morning and notice it again. A faint patch of darker skin across the cheek, a cluster of small spots near the temples, a tone that seems slightly uneven compared to a few years ago. At first, it feels like a simple cosmetic issue, so the usual solutions begin: a new brightening cream, a stronger sunscreen, maybe a serum that promises to correct pigmentation at the source. And sometimes those things help for a while, but for many people, the pattern quietly repeats. The discoloration fades, then slowly returns, which raises an uncomfortable question. If pigmentation is only a surface skin problem, why does it often come back? Most modern skincare approaches assume the issue lies entirely in the skin itself. The melanocytes become overactive, melanin production increases, and dark spots appear. From that perspective, the solution seems obvious: treat the skin. But ancient healing traditions often looked at the body very differently. In several old American herbal systems, skin changes were sometimes seen as signals rather than isolated problems. Subtle messages reflecting deeper shifts inside the body, not proof. Not diagnosis, just signals worth paying attention to, and one organ in particular appeared repeatedly in those observations: the liver. Now, before we go any further, it's important to clarify something. Pigmentation is very often dermatological. Sun exposure, hormonal changes, genetics, and inflammation all play major roles. But ancient healers sometimes asked a different question: what if the skin is not always the origin of the message, but sometimes the place where the message appears? To understand why that idea even existed, we have to look at something interesting about modern life. Because pigmentation issues seem far more common today than they once were. Look around and you'll notice it everywhere: uneven tone, melasma across the cheeks, persistent dark patches that don't fully respond to surface treatments. Dermatology explains much of this through ultraviolet exposure and hormonal fluctuations, and that explanation is largely correct. But there are also environmental and lifestyle changes that quietly affect the systems responsible for how the body processes stress, toxins, and metabolic waste. Today, we live in a world where the body constantly processes more than it historically did. Highly processed foods, irregular eating patterns, artificial lighting that disrupts circadian rhythms, chronic psychological stress, environmental pollutants. Each of these factors individually may seem small, but together they create a background level of metabolic pressure that earlier generations rarely experienced. The body adapts remarkably well, but adaptation requires coordination between multiple internal systems: digestion, hormones, circulation, detoxification. And this is where the liver enters the conversation. The liver is one of the most complex and hard-working organs in the human body. It performs hundreds of biochemical tasks every single day. It helps process nutrients from food. It regulates blood sugar. It produces bile for digestion. It transforms toxins into substances the body can safely eliminate. In simple terms, the liver functions like an enormous biochemical processing center. Everything that enters the bloodstream eventually passes through its filters: hormones, medications, environmental chemicals, metabolic waste. The liver doesn't just remove toxins in the way people often imagine. It actually transforms substances into different chemical forms so they can be safely processed or excreted. And this process happens in phases. First, certain enzymes modify substances into intermediate compounds. Then, additional pathways bind those compounds so they can be eliminated through bile or urine. Most of the time, this system works quietly and efficiently without us ever noticing. But ancient healers observed something curious. When digestion slowed, When people felt chronically fatigued after meals, or when the body seemed stagnant, subtle skin changes sometimes appeared alongside those symptoms. They didn't have biochemical models of liver enzymes or metabolic pathways, but they were careful observers, and they began describing the skin as a surface reflection of internal balance. Not in a mystical sense, more in the way that a dashboard light reflects something happening under the hood of a car. One area that fascinated traditional herbal practitioners was bitterness. Today, bitterness is a flavor most people try to avoid, but historically, bitter plants were considered extremely important for digestive health. Many indigenous American herbal traditions used bitter herbs before meals to gently stimulate digestive activity. The idea was simple. Bitterness signals the body to prepare. When bitter compounds touch the tongue, they activate receptors that trigger digestive reflexes throughout the body. Saliva increases, stomach acid begins to flow, bile production rises. Digestive enzymes prepare to break down food more efficiently. This entire cascade helps digestion run more smoothly. And because bile is produced by the liver, bitter herbs indirectly support one of the liver's important digestive functions. Several plants were commonly used in traditional American herbal practices for this purpose. Dandelion was one of the most widely respected bitter plants. Both the root and the leaves were used historically to support digestion and bile flow. Oregon grapefruit was another powerful bitter herb used in certain North American traditions. It contains alkaloids that give it a strong bitter profile. Burdock root appeared frequently in traditional preparations as well, often associated with blood purification rituals. Yellow dock root was valued for its bitter tonics that supported digestive balance. Gentian root, although used globally, was also incorporated into herbal practices across the Americas because of its extremely potent bitterness. Artichoke leaf, while more Mediterranean in origin, shares similar bitter compounds and has become widely used in modern herbal digestive formulas. Milk thistle later gained attention for compounds that appear to support liver cell resilience. Chicory root was often brewed into bitter tonics and digestive beverages. Wild lettuce was occasionally used in certain herbal preparations, and golden seal root appeared in various traditional medicinal contexts for its strong bitter alkaloids. What these plants shared was not magical detox powers. It was bitterness, and bitterness has real physiological effects. By stimulating digestion, bile production, and metabolic signaling, bitter herbs can indirectly support how the body processes nutrients and waste. Ancient healers didn't describe this in biochemical language, but they noticed patterns. People who regularly consumed bitter plants often reported better digestion, improved appetite regulation, and a general sense of internal balance. Whether or not this directly affects skin pigmentation remains uncertain, but the underlying biological systems are connected. Digestion influences hormone balance. Hormones influence melanin activity. Inflammation influences how skin cells behave, which means the skin is constantly responding to signals generated throughout the body. Now consider something else about modern life. Many of the bitter plants our ancestors consumed regularly have quietly disappeared from everyday diets. Wild greens, bitter herbs, seasonal plants that once appeared naturally in traditional meals. Modern diets tend to emphasize sweetness, saltiness, and processed textures instead. Bitterness has been engineered out of many foods because it is considered unpleasant. But in removing bitterness, we may have also removed subtle signals that once helped regulate digestion. Combine that with another modern factor: chronic stress. When the body perceives stress, it activates the sympathetic nervous system, the fight or flight response. In that state, digestion becomes a lower priority. Blood flow shifts toward muscles. Stomach. Acid decreases, digestive enzymes become less active. Over time, irregular digestion can influence how nutrients are absorbed and how metabolic byproducts are processed. Add processed foods, environmental exposures, and disrupted sleep patterns, and the metabolic workload increases even more. None of this means the liver is failing. The liver is remarkably resilient. But it does mean the body may be working harder than it once did to maintain balance. And ancient healers often interpreted subtle changes, including skin changes, as signs that the body needed more support. Again, this does not mean pigmentation is caused by liver dysfunction. Modern dermatology clearly shows that sun exposure is the dominant factor behind most pigmentation patterns. Ultraviolet radiation stimulates melanocytes to produce melanin as a protective response. Hormonal fluctuations, especially estrogen shifts, can also trigger melasma. Inflammation from acne or injury can leave post-inflammatory hyperpigmentation. Genetics strongly influence how skin responds to environmental triggers. These explanations are well supported by scientific evidence. But the ancient perspective invites a broader question. Instead of asking only how to remove pigmentation from the skin, what if we also asked what the body might be experiencing overall? Are digestion, sleep, stress, and metabolic health in balance? Are we living in a way that supports the body's internal rhythms? Ancient healing systems rarely separated the skin from the rest of the body. They viewed health as a network of relationships, digestion affecting energy, energy affecting mood, mood affecting hormones, hormones influencing skin. From that perspective, skin changes were not simply cosmetic. They were part of a larger conversation happening inside the body. Modern science is beginning to rediscover some of these connections. The gut-skin axis, for example, explores how digestive health influences inflammation and skin conditions. The liver-hormone relationship shows how metabolic processing affects hormone balance, and systemic inflammation has been linked to a wide range of dermatological conditions. None of this proves that pigmentation originates in the liver, but it does support the idea that the skin responds to signals generated throughout the body, which brings us back to that mirror moment. The dark spots, the uneven tone, the patches that seem to appear quietly. Over time, maybe they are simply the result of sunlight interacting with melanocytes. Maybe they are influenced by hormones. Maybe they are a combination of many different biological factors. But ancient traditions offer one additional perspective, instead of seeing the skin as a battlefield where problems must be erased. They saw it as a translator, a surface where deeper biological conversations occasionally become visible. That perspective doesn't reject dermatology. It simply widens the lens. It reminds us that the body is not a collection of isolated parts. It is an interconnected system constantly adjusting, communicating, and responding to the environment around it. And sometimes the skin becomes the place where those adjustments quietly reveal themselves. So the next time you notice those faint patches in the mirror, it might still make sense to care for the skin itself. Sun protection, thoughtful skincare, dermatological guidance when needed. But it may also be worth asking a slightly different question. Not just, how do I remove this spot? But, what might my body be trying to balance? Because your skin might not be fighting against you. It might simply be translating something deeper your body is still learning how to say.